Oh, howdy and hello everyone, and what am I doing, you ask? Why, I'm building up my protection systems for this video. Why? It's because the topics covered here will almost certainly piss someone off, so I'm making sure that when the moment comes that I do get attacked, I'm at least somewhat prepared, and trust me, I have protection.
High-speed rail.
High-speed rail is something that I'm sure everyone watching this video knows is in progress in the US, but it still isn't a reality.
A cell is the closest the US has gotten, and its top speed of 160 is only reached for a select portion, and its average speed is 70 miles an hour. So yeah, just saying guys, we really aren't there yet.
Now before I start this video, I just want to preference that I want high-speed rail just as much as the next guy here in the US, but the reason why we don't have it yet is because of a lot of what I'm going to be discussing in this video.
A lot of that stuff will make a lot of urbanists, and on the complete other side of the debate, NIMBYs very angry, but just saying, I'm the same person who got coded a bit ago because of a narrow font, so I'm really not supposed to be taken seriously.
So to make my life easier, we're going to look at as many of the higher speed rail projects in the US right now, their current condition, and how they got to where they are.
For those of you who are unfamiliar, Brightline is a high enough speed rail running from Miami to Orlando. It runs frequently from the early morning to midnight and is used both by travelers and commuters. Brightline is also privately owned and mostly privately funded.
This private ownership means that Brightline has a bigger focus on making the customer as happy as possible to make sure they come back as much as possible because, you know, money.
The two main issues with Brightline has, oddly enough, to do with them being private. Brightline runs partially on trackage owned by the Florida East Coast Railway, or the FEC, a Class II freight railroad. When Brightline began service, the FEC was owned under the same umbrella as Brightline, and so the FEC was forced to comply and let Brightline run on their trackage.
Sounds all nice and perfect, right? Well, guess what happened?
The FEC was bought by a group in Mexico in 2017, the same people who own Ferromex, which my SoCal viewers will probably recognize. Because of this change in ownership, the FEC was now in a simple agreement with Brightline regarding their trackage uses. And how did Brightline respond to this?
My house is on fire, we're having the coolest Halloween party. Brightline continued to add trains and services, further congesting FEC lines, and when the FEC tried to get to Brightline about maybe cooling it with the expansions, Brightline hit them with the hand.
This was all under a bunch of tension until the FEC finally gave when talks started escalating of beginning a new commuter rail line along FEC trackage. This led to the FEC suing Brightline in the summer of 2025.
Now it's time for the peak of railroad roasting, so I've come very prepared.
The FEC said, and I quote, "The cooperation and transparency between FECR and Brightline that made Brightline's passenger service a reality has unfortunately long disappeared. Desperate to salvage some of its investors' funds, Brightline has covertly engaged in a years-long campaign to starve off its own financial problems by loading FECR trackage with more passenger trains." Brightline responded by saying, "Brightline does not comment on the ongoing litigation, but this claim is without merit and we have filed a motion to dismiss and compel arbitration." Essentially, they were saying the FEC was speaking right out of their ass, which, to be fair, is a possibility considering how greedy freight railroads can be. FEC continued by saying that funding is dead in the water, as Brightline's representations are not only legally prohibited by its agreements with FECR, but also practically precluded by FECR's existing use of its trackage. Brightline kept FECR in the dark because it knew full well that its expansion plan not only threatened to significantly disrupt FECR's freight service, but was also impossible without substantial new investment in track and facility infrastructure, which Brightline certainly cannot afford. Today, the company teeters on the brink of insolvency and financial collapse, but rather than gratitude for the use of the FEC corridor, Brightline wants more trains, and more profit.
Bro, stop, he's already dead!
Then the FEC went after the proposed commuter rail. Instead of reducing congestion and improving efficiency, it will hinder the county's ability to alleviate traffic by diverting resources away from freight transport, disrupt critical supply chains, and jeopardize the efficiency of the Port Miami by forcing more freight onto trucks. To sum all of that masterful cooking up, Brightline hasn't been as financially stable as everyone thought. Their ridership, while it isn't on a decline, it's still rising, is far below projections. So in sight of trains often reaching capacity, and with them receiving new orders of trains from Siemens, Brightline continued to add more and more trains to the corridor, and just didn't tell the FEC about it?
What the? It was hot?
This agreement that the FEC keeps referring to is one that some of you may find suspiciously familiar. This agreement states that the FEC and Brightline may exist together on the same trackage as long as they don't get in each other's way. Doing that would violate the agreement. Sound familiar?
I thought we learned our lesson with trying to negotiate with these people.
There's an agreement in the form of a law that's supposed to be keeping freight rail out of Amtrak's hair and vice versa. But because apparently Amtrak gets in the way of freight railroads, they are free to run as they please, Amtrak be damned.
Well, why not just add capacity to the corridor, a few of you are probably saying. Well, that's where FEC's next point comes in.
The FEC is stating that Brightline doesn't have the money to add a third track to the FEC corridor as would be needed, and they definitely don't have the money to add all the infrastructure needed to support more of their trains, alongside this new commuter rail. Which leads us to the second problem Brightline faces.
Brightline's placement in Florida is both a win and a loss.
I'm going to try and stay as non-politically as I can, but essentially, Florida, in comparison to states like California, has relaxed laws when it comes to building stuff like transit, which made building and running Brightline far easier. The issue with Florida is they do not want to fund Brightline at all.
Brightline has received money from the federal government, local counties, and even the state on small occasions, but in pursuit of costing the taxpayers as little money as possible in case the project were to fail, Brightline has received next to no funding from the state of Florida.
The thing with transit is, if you want it to work, you need money from the government at some point along the way. Highways and air travel are the same story. They are subsidized heavily by the governments they surround, and for some reason, everyone acts like rail isn't the same story. Florida is like this, and the funny part is, maybe if you gave the company that has proven it can make a good service that serves the people money, it wouldn't be on a downward spiral. I'm sure that if Brightline got funding from the state, they could build this extra capacity so that they could have their extra trains. FEC can have their trains, and the counties can have their commuter rail. But that's all going to cost a lot of money, and said money is just not coming out, I guess.
The saving grace here is that the FEC isn't trying to be hostile. They're just noticing how Brightline isn't acknowledging them in any way, and they don't want to start removing trains.
They stated themselves, saying how it's not their intention to disrupt deals underway with Brightline and the counties it serves, they simply just want to be heard and haven't been getting that. I believe that given the resources to, they can succeed and make a service we can all enjoy. But in order for that to happen, we need a heck of a lot of people to cooperate, and unfortunately, it just isn't happening right now.
You see, I may have made a typo here. This says, go over, like, 3 other high-speed rail projects, and I said barely anything past that. So, speed round?
Brightline West, name a more tantalizing project, I dare you.
Please, you're so close, just do something!
Brightline West is a high-speed rail project operated by Brightline that will run from Rancho Cucamonga in the Inland Empire to Las Vegas in Nevada. In Rancho, it will link up with Metrolink to establish a way to get from Los Angeles to Las Vegas in a little under 3 hours. This project is just doing everything but construction.
Brightline West has found the for sure placement for all of their funding, ordered all their train sets, been under pre-construction for over a year now, but they're just doing anything but starting full heavy construction.
Surprise, surprise, making a high-speed rail line that partially goes through a state with a ton of environmental laws is hard. This just in. The atmosphere has air in it.
What?
Brightline has stated that they plan to start service in late 2028/2029. As I'm writing this, it's 2025. So if they want to make that deadline, we may be about to see some of the speediest high-speed rail construction the world has ever laid its eyes upon, especially in comparison to you-know-who I will touch on in a second.
But until construction actually starts, we have no way of knowing when it's truly gonna enter service.
So real quick, going into an unscripted bit, because some stuff has changed with Brightline West since I wrote that bit. Brightline West is now expected to cost $21.5 billion, and their estimated service start is now September of 2029. This is way over their December 2028 start and $12.4 billion, but thankfully this is all because they have now estimated where they're going to get their construction stuff from and other stuff like that. So this is like a finalized cost, hopefully, and any more cost overruns would have to come from stupidity from the states or something like that. So hopefully no more cost overruns, but you never know. Texas Central, sorry, I need to make an adjustment real quick. There we go. Texas Central.
Texas Central, out of all the high-speed rail projects in the US right now, is seeing by far the most problems, which is one hell of an accomplishment.
Texas Central is a high-speed rail project that is also privately run, trying to get from Austin, Texas to Dallas-Fort Worth. The problem here is Texas Central is nowhere near starting construction, and the only thing keeping the project alive is essentially thoughts and prayers.
This project, unlike Brightline West, is not taking the approach of running in a highway median, but is instead taking the more conventional approach of just charging straight through private land, which is going about as well as you'd expect.
Texans have made it unbelievably hard to get this project off the ground. The project is seeing roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. One of the project's main selling points was its promise to use absolutely no taxpayer dollars, which, as we saw with Brightline Florida, is damn near impossible. Amtrak came in at some point to help out with the project, but in mid-2025, Amtrak was forced to step out of the project, once again leaving it on its own.
If Texas Central manages to get done, I will be surprised. Like, really surprised. It's not that I oppose it, but with how many people do, the chances of it actually going anywhere are so slim that I have basically no confidence in it actually happening at this point.
Cascadia High-Speed Rail. This is a newer and lesser known project planning to connect Portland, Oregon with Seattle, Washington and Vancouver, British Columbia. As of me writing this video, this project is still very much in the planning stage, but so far nothing has gone wrong yet. The most major accomplishment in recent times was the securement of a $50 million grant from the FRA in 2024 to develop a service development strategy. So thankfully, this project is actually going somewhere.
Now, there are a few other high-speed rail projects I could talk about, but you may notice I'm forgetting one in particular, and that one is from my home state of California, and just making sure I get the proper defenses up here. I'm going to talk about this as objectively as possible, and make sure to stay as objective as possible to make sure I don't die here. Because I'm almost certain I'm going to piss someone off in the process of saying this. So, this project is, of course,
California High-Speed Rail. Whoa. I'm alive. In 2008, California voters approved Proposition 1A. This bill was meant to plan and develop a high-speed rail system to connect the state in 2 phases. Phase 1 would connect San Francisco to Anaheim via the Central Valley and Los Angeles. Phase 2 would extend the initial operating segment from Los Angeles to San Diego via the Inland Empire and Escondido, and extend from Merced to Sacramento. The initial estimated cost was a little over $30 billion, of which Prop 1A was to provide 9 Only 9! Yeah, the initial Prop 1A bill only provided $9 billion of the nearly $32 billion the project was estimated to cost. Now, obviously, it would be impractical to give the full 32 in one go, but $9 billion was only enough to pay for a small segment of the project. And where was the authority gonna get the rest of the money? So things were already not looking too good. Where California was going to get the other nearly $23 billion was just casually left undecided, and it also didn't help that the people managing the project at first didn't exactly know how to do a high-speed rail system.
So why not get someone who does know how to do it, you're probably saying? Well, that's what they did do, and, well,
California High-Speed Rail got the French SNCF to help out with them finding an alignment for the route early on. However, SNCF had their eyes less on connectivity and more on profits. SNCF proposed running the train along I-5, which mainly runs along the west side of the Central Valley, and then to just have branch lines going to each of the major Central Valley cities. The authority didn't exactly favor this. This is because California's Central Valley has a population of nearly 7 million people, including the cities of Fresno and Bakersfield, which have metro populations of 1,900,000 people each. Not exactly something you can just casually bypass and then build a branch line to. Because of these disputes, SNCF left the project and the authority decided on the alignment it follows, which follows SR 99 rather than I-5, traveling straight from these cities.
And now we reach the 2010s, which really wasn't much better.
In 2013, a judge from the Sacramento Supreme Court decided that the high-speed rail project did not meet the requirements of Prop 1A and prohibited the state from spending the $8 billion left from Prop 1A until those requirements were met, alongside identifying $25 billion in funding. There's where that funding issue finally gets some attention.
By now, the project was starting to cost more and more, and construction still hadn't started.
A lot of this can be choked up to California's extra environmental regulations, specifically CEQA. CEQA made it significantly harder to begin and continue construction because the environmental review process was significantly more costly and time-consuming. And the ironic thing is, this project, alongside all other fully electrified high-speed rail projects in the world, is the cleanest form of mass public transportation. So you mean to tell me you had to do a bunch of extra environmental risk studies for something that, in the end, will make the environmental quality better? I'm not saying this is entirely what made the project take so long, but you can't deny the state was not helping. Finally, in 2015, construction started in the Central Valley. The reasoning for starting in the Central Valley was simple. It was flat, cheap to build on, and worst case scenario was at least going to connect those 7 million people who live there, which in the grand scheme of things isn't exactly nothing. But at the same time, the cost still was creeping up and funding was still nowhere to be found. In 2016, the authority released a timeline on how they plan to go about this. In 2018, they plan to complete Merced to Bakersfield. In 2022, they plan to complete Bakersfield to Burbank. In 2027, they plan to complete Merced to San Jose. And in 2029, they plan to complete the full Phase 1 from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Totally doable timeline. Totally wouldn't be in the realm of reconsidering the completion to the 2040s or the 2050s or the 2060s or 70s. Oh no.
After the big funny ended in 2022, the California High-Speed Rail Authority had made progress, but was far behind schedule.
While multiple structures in the Central Valley were either complete or in progress, nothing past that had happened. The most talked about one being no track laid, which while on the surface is a fair claim to make, in order to lay track you need to get a lot of other stuff to happen, and that's what they've been fiddling around with for the past, oh my god, 7 years at this point.
And the biggest point here was that this project was still so far underfunded. At this point, the Central Valley segment was estimated to cost a little over $30 billion, which, funnily enough, was the original cost of the entire project. At that point, the authority was short billions of dollars and had only spent around $12 billion in total.
But in 2024, the first major accomplishment since construction had finally come to fruition. One of the 4 construction packages, as the authority calls it, had been completed. Completed as in all viaducts, bridges, and guideways were done and ready to have tracks laid. This was followed by just a few months ago in 2025 by the BNSF railhead being placed. A railhead is the first step in actually getting tracks down, meaning that hopefully within the next year or so, track infrastructure like catenaries should finally be going in. Until then, what's that $4 billion being held up? Oh, joy!
Also in 2025, the federal government held up $4 billion in funding that were supposed to go to the project that were kinda needed to finish the Central Valley segment. Their reasoning being...
I can't say I don't see their point.
But also in 2025, the state government extended the cap-and-trade funds going to the project until 2045, which, to explain it in simple terms...
The project went from being cooked to not cooked in the span of a month. I wonder how the blood pressure of the CEO looks. The cap-and-trade program guarantees at least $1 billion per year to the project, which combined with the funding they currently have, gives the authority, finally, after a little over a decade, enough money to actually finish and be operational on Merced to Bakersfield by, in their words, January 1st of 2032.
It's not perfect, but I'll take anything at this point.
And that's all with at least $2 billion to spare. The authority said they'd have 6, but that's assuming they get their $4 billion back, which I really doubt.
Throughout all this commotion, the authority came up with 3 plans to connect with something.
Their first plan is to just continue as they are, finish Merced to Bakersfield, and then start building to San Francisco from there. The issue with that is when they do finish that segment, the system will not be a help to the state at all, meaning the system cannot stay in the Central Valley. It has to get out one way or another, and thankfully, it seems like they have realized this, which explains the other 2 alternatives. Alternative 2 is cutting off Merced and instead going straight to Gilroy. This required an extra $9 billion, which they do not have. Shock, shock, surprise, surprise.
Damn it!
From Gilroy, they would electrify the trackage from there to San Jose to meet up with Caltrain in San Jose as originally planned and run on their tracks to San Francisco. The problem here is Union Pacific owns the tracks south of San Jose, and they're like an annoying toddler, aka they do not want to give anything up. The way the authority words it is a state-coordinated solution, which I feel like is code word for bully the crap out of UP until they give up the trackage to electrify. I'd imagine this would come with an additional 3rd track and the ability for Caltrain to run fully electrified from San Francisco to Gilroy. This, I feel, is the best option out of the 3. Obviously, it would require them to get even more money, which is going to be no easier than the past 50 million times, but if they can do it, and for the love of God actually get it done before the cost rises even further, I feel it would lead to the High-Speed Rail Authority actually seeing notable ridership and lead to finally a bigger trust in it, which would hopefully make the rest of the system far easier to complete. Speaking of the rest of the system, option 3, Gilroy to Palmdale.
I know how to fix our money problems. Let's spend even more money!
Yeah, this alternative would cost even more than just doing Gilroy. The benefit here is that at Palmdale, the system would connect with Metrolink's Antelope Valley line, which connects directly with LA Union Station, and Brightline West via the High Desert Corridor, a project that is being taken on mostly by Los Angeles County to connect California High-Speed Rail and Brightline. This alternative costs more than doing just Gilroy and would take longer than Gilroy, which, while they're gonna have to get there at some point, it's better if they handle one thing at a time and just focus on getting to the Bay Area for now. Now, when would Gilroy or Palmdale be finished?
If it was any earlier than the 2040s, I'd be very surprised.
While they at least aren't miles behind on funding, with how quickly the Central Valley moved, the possibility of just Gilroy being complete before 2040 is some seriously wishful thinking. Now, when it comes to the full Phase 1, I don't want to be a bearer of bad news, but I also don't want to straight up lie to you. The Bakersfield to LA segment, which might be the Palmdale to LA or Gilroy to San Jose and Palmdale to LA segment, is going to take a long while. From Palmdale, the project has to go through one of the mountain passes in the area and fund the reconfiguring of LA Union Station and do the LA to Anaheim portion. That's going to cost tens of billions of dollars the authority definitely doesn't have, and will be one hell of a struggle to get. The only way for Bakersfield to LA/Palmdale to LA to be completed any sooner would require an absolute miracle and or an extremely drastic change in mindset to literally everyone in control. And how about Phase 2?
That question's on the same level of asking when we're gonna colonize Mars. If it does happen, and that's a very big if, it's gonna be nowhere near the current timeline we're in right now.
22nd century. Yeah, forget how dead anyone over the age of 40 right now will be by that time. I'll probably be dead by the time Phase 2 is complete. Again, even if it does happen in its planned state. Now, if you'll please, for the love of God, I'm begging, let me add in some opinion here. I think that if the state had handled this project in even smaller phases from the start, for example, starting with San Francisco to like Madera, then Madera to Bakersfield, and then Bakersfield to Anaheim, I feel that this would have had it further along, as the initial $9 billion could have actually amounted to something and allowed them to handle things in chunks from the start. Same reason why Brightline didn't immediately go to Tampa and instead built their way up there. But it's just a thought. Please, for the love of God, pissy urbanists, stay away. This is my corner of the internet. You have your own. Now stay over there.
I don't want to keep throwing up such bad news like this, but we can either lie to ourselves or face the hard truths that unless some insane miracle happens, this project won't be done for a very long time. And that goes for not just California high-speed rail, but a lot of other high-speed rail projects in the US right now. So what did we learn today? Well, high-speed rail in the US is hard, and the Florida East Coast Railway should really start writing diss tracks. Howdy and hello everyone, and I think I found this in a dumpster. I'm starting to think I'm the only one.